We have left no doubt, none, that Donald Trump led an effort to upend American democracy that directly resulted in the violence of January 6th.
We are obligated to seek answers directly from the man who set this all in motion.
The January 6th committee has unanimously voted to subpoena former President Donald Trump. He has responded in the last hour, calling the work of the committee a, quote, witch hunt, and reiterating claims that the 2020 election was stolen. Trump joins a small club of presidents who have been subpoenaed by Congress. It includes John Tyler, John Quincy Adams, Harry Truman, and Richard Nixon. Other presidents, including Thomas Jefferson, James Monroe, and Bill Clinton, have been subpoenaed, but not before Congress. The vote to subpoena came after an intense hearing that featured previously unseen footage of lawmakers trying to get help as violent rioters worked to keep Congress from certifying the 2020 election for Joe Biden.
They're just breaking windows. They're doing all kinds of. It's really that they said somebody was shot. It was just horrendous, and all at the instigation of the President of the United States.
Yeah, why don't you get the President to tell them to leave the Capitol, Mr. Attorney General, in your law enforcement responsibility? A public statement, they should all leave.
So joining me now to talk more about the significance of this subpoena is retired Lieutenant General Russel Honore, the man selected by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi to lead a review of the U.S. Capitol security after January 6th. Thank you for joining us this morning. So we wanted to start with your initial reaction to the committee's decision to subpoena the former president, sir.
Oh, I think it's a move in the right direction. People have watched this committee operate over the last several months, exposing the president's role in planning and his ability to commit conspiracy with even members of law enforcement, it appears, and his complicit action of some of the lead agencies that should have been responding more quickly to what was going on at the Capitol. And his actions were pre-planned. They were announced by his buddy Steve Bannon on what he was going to do, and he did it in plain daylight. And as we all watched on TV as this event occurred, then to come back and said, "Don't believe your lying eyes." We saw this. The hearing has laid it out plain that the president was behind the planning of this, and he and his inside kitchen cabinet, as we might call them. And it also demonstrated the courage and leadership of Leader Pelosi in helping keep our nation together, along with Vice President Pence and his courage to hold the damn line.
All right, so that's interesting. So to your point, in the hearing yesterday, we did learn that the Secret Service knew of the threat more than a week before that violence. It raises serious questions, I would say, about their handling of that intelligence. So what is your take?
Well, intelligence was a major finding in the 1/6 review we did with our team and provided that to the House and the Senate, intelligence failures. But this was not just an intelligence failure of people getting the right information. It may have been a distortion of the truth in what was known. And there's certain members of the Secret Service that need to answer some serious questions as to what role they may have played in suppressing that information and not sharing it clearly with the Capitol Police. Certainly when guns were observed on the mall near the eclipse, that information should have been passed to the Capitol Police, and more officers from the FBI and the National Guard should have been more quickly sent to the Capitol. It is shameful to see the Speaker begging the Pentagon to send help from the National Guard. The Pentagon, an organization that her and Speaker and Leader Schumer provide over $800 billion a year, and they couldn't make a decision quickly enough to get the Guard there in time. That's shameful. But the Speaker and the leader, along with Leader McConnell, the three of them working together, along with the Vice President, held the damn line to go back and conduct the vote. But this was a plain conspiracy, I think, by former President Trump.
So we're curious, what did you find when you reviewed security infrastructure, interagency processes, command and control of the Capitol in the wake of this attack?
Well, one of the findings was failure intelligence, as I mentioned, to share that intelligence with the Capitol Police so they could take appropriate action. The other one was command and control, that the Capitol Police was in disarray. They did not have the proper communications equipment, nor did they use what we call the NIMS, National Incident Management System, in responding. Thank God for the DC police who showed up in numbers that could help them hold the line at the Capitol. The other thing was the Capitol need to be hardened. We recommended fences. That was quickly discarded by the architect of the Capitol and some members in the Senate who did not want those retractable fences we recommended. And the hardening of the Capitol, the windows needed to be, and the doors needed to be reinforced, and that has not been done yet. And we recommended 800 additional officers be added to the Capitol Police. That was rejected by the Senate in the supplemental that was submitted by Speaker Pelosi in the House. We have more threats against our members of Congress today than we've ever had. It's hundreds-fold more than it normally would be. Yet, the key members in the House and the Senate, like Speaker McCarthy and Leader McConnell, have full-time, 24-hour-a-day Capitol Police support. They need more Capitol Police, and they don't have them. They have hired some security guards to help them with their administrative duties, but they're still short Capitol Police. And this could happen again because they've done very little to fix the response for the National Guard, and they've done very little in hiring more police. So we could see this play out again.
Well, it's troubling to hear, and you were talking about some of those threats to policymakers. So how do we prevent those and prevent another January 6th?
I think we need to pay close attention to the information that came out of the 1-6 hearing led by Representative Cummins and Cheney. I think you'd pay close attention, and we need to get the Justice Department to do what they do. That is to hold not just the line troops who attacked the Capitol accountable, but hold the leadership, those that were involved in planning and the conspiracy that occurred to dupe the American people to think the president was an honest player in here, President Trump. He conspired and caused this event to happen on the Capitol. That is clear as daylight. But the truth will continue to shed light on this, and I think the press making this available to the American people will help. But the Justice Department will have to now do what they do in their constitutional authority to hold everybody accountable.
You have expertise in a number of topics. I'd like to change the subject just for a moment to talk about the thousands of Floridians, folks in the Carolinas that are in need of help due to Hurricane Ian. What does the state and federal government need to do to fix that problem, would you say?
Recovery is a living hell. We could go back 2 years ago to Laura that hit Lake Charles. They're just getting the money to fix public housing and to resolve issues with people that didn't have insurance. And we lost 10 insurance companies last year in Louisiana from Hurricane Ida. Florida is facing the same problem. The difference is the magnitude in Florida is a lot larger than we experienced with those two previous hurricanes that caused devastating damage in Louisiana. The challenge in Florida is the numbers. We have not seen this number of people affected with the household items out on the street from the flooding and the destruction of the storm. The federal government and the state is going to have to step up the game in the term of speed in providing temporary housing, as well as to make decisions on building codes on where they're going to rebuild. And right now, that system is so slow, and this money is going to have to be appropriated by this transition Congress. Whatever happened next month between the election and Christmas, this Congress is going to have to come together and come up with numbers to pay for to get FEMA and HUD moving so they'd have the money to do the temporary housing, to provide the hotels as required, and to provide other support to try and get people to survive through the winter. Even though it's light in Florida, it's going to be a challenge because of sheer numbers that will overwhelm the system as we know it now. And I've recommended that President Biden assign an executive administrator to work for him out of the White House, to work with Governor DeSantis down in Florida as an administrator for Hurricane Ian. Because the enormity of the system, as President Bush did after Katrina, is more than the interagency process is designed to deal with. He needs an administrator there to help the governor get through the bureaucracy of recovery, because recovery is a living hell because everybody have to justify everything, and the insurance companies are going bust on us.
Yeah, certainly a challenge for so many. Well, thank you, Lieutenant General Russel Honore. We appreciate your insight as always.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.